After his iconic 60s western trilogy, Clint Eastwood teamed up with director Don Seigel for the first time in 1968 for Coogan's Bluff, the film that served as the prototype for the rest of his legendary career. A lot of people overlook Coogan's Bluff because the incredible Dirty Harry came after, but I think this movie deserves more attention for being the actual birth of the tough guy cop. This video was requested by channel member Don Eastwood. If you wish to request what I review on the channel, please consider clicking the join button below to become a channel member. As well as being the birth of the action hero, Coogan's Bluff is also the closest Clint Eastwood has ever come to James Bond in my opinion. I'd say this film and his spy thriller The Eiger Sanction from 1975 are his most Bond-like movies for different reasons. In Eiger Sanction it's more so for the gadgets and set pieces. In Coogan's Bluff, the character acts just like James Bond, despite the setup of the film and the character's background being a lot different. And Clint Eastwood was actually considered for James Bond, so it's crazy to see him interjecting parts of the Bond personality into his cop thrillers. There's a jovial and fun feeling to Coogan's Bluff that feels like the Bonds of the time, seducing women while of course attempting to get information out of them. This is of course a sexual attitude that is long gone these days, but if you want to see a very old school depiction of men and women on screen, Coogan's Bluff is a prime example. And although his character is similar to James Bond, it's still very unique because this is basically if Bond was a cop and his mission was ground level on the streets. So it's basically James Bond dipped in some gritty urban action. Much like the early Bond movies too, Coogan's Bluff is also extremely 60s. Very 60s. I'm surprised the bloody monkeys didn't show up. There's a sense of grooviness to the film, constant 60s music, colourful scenery, and Coogan continually meeting people who seem like they're stoned out of their mind.
Ladybug, fly away home.
Look, friends, we want to be alone.
Go away, Charlie. Yeah, while your legs still work.
All right, now, I don't like violence, Mr. Wonderful, whatever your name is. You better drop that blade, or you won't believe what happens next, even while it's happening.
Coogan's Bluff contains a very interesting take on the peace and love generation, as director Don Seigel depicts many of the hippies as people who don't really care about anything. Their anti-authority stance has blinded them to the fact that it probably isn't good to cover for criminals or be entirely anti-police. Seigel is clearly trying to show the clash between the urban and rural communities, and how peace and love has accidentally crossed over into passivity and acceptance of crime. It's great fun to watch Clint Eastwood as a cop navigating the swinging 60s. Everything feels very spontaneous in Coogan's Bluff, and you can never really predict what a character is going to do or say next. I really miss this freedom that the filmmakers in the late 60s and then 70s revelled in, ushering in the new Hollywood era where the intention was to just be as honest as possible about the world. No longer were directors making morality pieces, but instead examinations of urban ground level life, with characters who weren't perfect, but were very interesting and exciting to watch. Of course, Coogan's Bluff contains that element that we've seen 1,000 times in the years since, of the police chief berating the rebellious hero, as this renegade continues to do whatever he wants, regardless. It's a reused cliche today, but you have to remember this was very new back here, so it must have been a blast for viewers in the late 60s to watch one of their own disrespect their boss.
You could get him.
I'm a busy man.
You could walk right in there and get him for me.
Tex, you're getting on my nerves. Say, what gives with you people out there? Too much sun?
As New Hollywood was about to explode, people really began to enjoy films that took risks and spoke out against authority, changing course from the previous safe and stale action movies. Obviously, Clint would go on to perfect talking to his boss like shit for years after this, but it's great to see him start off here. Coogan was as cocky as any character he ever played, and the charisma of Eastwood on display is just as strong as it ever was. I honestly don't think people realise how important Eastwood was. He really pioneered turning Hollywood around and opening up so much creativity and untapped potential. People thought there would never be another John Wayne, and debatably, Clint Eastwood is better than John Wayne. But has there ever been another Clint Eastwood? Eastwood's charisma and uncompromising badassery were just unmatched, and it's such a joy to see him go from those spaghetti westerns which were earth-shattering in their own right, to then becoming the coolest cop on earth for the next decade. Coogan's Bluff does feel like a bit of a warm-up for Dirty Harry and the films Eastwood would do in the 70s, so it's not the most exciting, and it does lack the sense of urgency that those later cop thrillers would have, but you can clearly see Eastwood settling into this new kind of character, and Don Seigel was clearly experimenting with several elements that were expanded on in movies that followed. The fight scenes were suddenly down and dirty instead of phony as they had perhaps been in earlier action movies. Now there was more of an intention to make the fights believable and to see the characters actually bleed and suffer. The scene where Coogan is fighting a room full of assailants in a pool hall is a great example of that. Suddenly we were holding the camera on characters' bloody faces, and Don Seigel was determined to make the brutality and intensity sink in. And this was an early depiction of what Seigel went on to do with Dirty Harry and what Eastwood went on to do. Things were suddenly about the severity, and it was just suddenly no messing around. We want to show an honest depiction of how dirty it gets on the streets in this battle between the police and the criminals. The motorcycle chase is also pretty entertaining. I mean, it's not particularly extravagant, but it's still engaging, and looking back you can see how Don Seigel would have realised that these scenes had years of potential on the big screen. The chase feels like a prototype for the vehicle chases we would see in the 70s, and I think it's so obvious that the renegade cop action genre was coming alive here. Everything felt different and fresh, and a new bag of tricks was opened up for directors and action stars, specifically Clint Eastwood. Coogan's Bluff isn't really up there with the best of Clint Eastwood's films, but it's one of the most interesting in a historical context, and it's still very entertaining and fun to watch due to Eastwood's brilliant charm and charisma. What a once in a lifetime movie star he was. This era was a special time for cinema, and watching these films now, I love how it's like a time portal back to an era where films still had so much more to build on and explore. And it's a shame today that we can make good films, but it doesn't feel like the sky's the limit, and back here it really did. Let me know what you guys think of Coogan's Bluff and Clint Eastwood's cop thrillers it inspired. Please press subscribe for more classic and cult movie analysis and retrospectives, and I will see you guys next time.